well educated on HHO, then just skip this video because it'll bore you to death. But this is just for new people and people that want to follow along, but they just have no idea what HHO is, what it's about, just the basic information of what we're doing here. In this first part, I'm just going to focus on what actually happens during the electrolyzation process. What is actually happening between the two stainless steel plates. Here's an old clip of the first cell I made running at low production, low amperage, but just note the gaps between the stainless steel plates and watch the production. Alright, I got a good view right now, let's check it out. 2, 1. And off. Alright, now that process is called electrolysis. So, what is electrolysis and what's actually happening here? Let's take a deeper look. Alright, so just keep in mind this one simple thing. Everything around you right now is made of atoms. Even your own body is made of atoms. Atoms combine to make molecules. And as most people know, the molecule of water is H2O. That means it's a combination of 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen atom. So let's focus on that one molecule between 2 stainless steel plates. Now when we have our water in the container between 2 stainless steel plates and we electrify those plates with DC electricity, that makes one stainless steel plate positive and the other negative. Alright, so to give you a better idea of the H2O water molecule, it looks like this. A hydrogen atom is bonded to an oxygen atom, and then another hydrogen atom is bonded to that same oxygen atom. So the hydrogen atoms are attracted to the negative stainless steel plate, while the oxygen atom is attracted to the positive stainless steel plate. Now, as they're attracted, they pull towards those plates and the bonds snap, and you have separate hydrogen and oxygen atoms. So now these separated hydrogen and oxygen atoms are lighter than the H2O molecules they're sitting in, the water, so they float to the top. And to our eyes, it looks like bubbles floating up. And this is exactly what you're seeing every time someone turns on an electrolyzer. Just bubbles of hydrogen and oxygen floating to the top. And yes, there is more going on in there, but right now I just want to keep it basic so that everybody understands the process. And also, just to clarify, you can't see atoms with your eyes. When a bubble's coming up, that's not an atom. That is an uncountable amount of hydrogen and oxygen atoms within that one bubble. Alright, so now you got a basic idea of what's happening between the plates, but there's 2 things to add to this to complete the whole process of the basic understanding. Normal water, as we know, that we drink out of our tap or bottled water every day, is not just H2O molecules. It's filled with minerals like fluoride and all kinds of things in there. Now what happens when you electrolyze water with minerals in it, such as tap water, you create this brown, reddish sludge. It looks like tomato soup. And you want to avoid that. So the way to avoid that is to use distilled water so you get the most amount of H2O molecules you can get and the least amount of minerals. Now, the second thing I want to say is that when you put an electrical current through water, just water alone, especially distilled water, you're not going to get much production at all. So what we want to do is allow the electricity to pass through the water easily. So what we want to do is add something called an electrolyte, just something that allows the electricity to flow through better. Now we got 4 choices of electrolyte to use. We got salt, baking soda, and those 2 I would not recommend. The next 2 I would recommend, and that is sodium hydroxide or potassium hydroxide. These are very good electrolytes. Both of them will work very well for you. So basically, electrolyzation consists of distilled water, adding a teaspoon or 2 of an electrolyte in there, putting in stainless steel plates, electrifying them with DC electricity, allowing the water molecules H2O to then separate into separate hydrogen and oxygen atoms, then they float to the top and you've created HHO gas. Alright, I just want to distinguish between 2 things that I find a lot of people I explain HHO fuel cells to, they kind of think I'm talking about a hydrogen fuel cell. So there's a big difference between the 2, and I just want to explain that really quick. Okay, so as you've seen, an HHO fuel cell takes apart molecules of water and breaks them into hydrogen and oxygen atoms. That's creating a gas. A hydrogen fuel cell does not create gas. It takes already made hydrogen, and it has to be pure hydrogen, and it runs it through a fuel cell with a platinum catalyst, and the platinum catalyst actually separates one atom of hydrogen, takes the proton, throws it one way, has the electron, is sucked another way. The electrons are all fed to create electricity in an electric motor. And this is exactly what they've used on the space shuttle for a long time. They take hydrogen and make electricity. So when you hear GM or any of the other companies talking about hydrogen fuel cell cars, that means you're storing pure hydrogen, no oxygen. You're storing pure hydrogen in your car in a tank in the back. That hydrogen's fed through a platinum catalyst which separates the hydrogen atom and creates electricity. So hydrogen fuel cells create electricity. HHO fuel cells create hydroxy gas, hydrogen oxygen mixed gas. Just wanted to clear that up. And as you see, one good thing about a hydrogen fuel cell is that when the proton and electron are joined again and you have hydrogen coming out the exhaust, it mixes with the oxygen that's naturally in the air and creates another water molecule. So you get water coming out of the exhaust of these electric cars that run off hydrogen fuel cells. So that's the benefit. Now I want to explain to you the reason I don't like them. Alright, the first reason I don't like a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle is because you have to store the hydrogen in a carbon fiber tank in the back. Carbon fiber tanks are strong, but I'm totally against storing explosive or combustible gases. I think that's a primitive thing that we shouldn't be doing anymore. The reason I like HHO electrolyzer fuel cells is because you can make the gas on demand as you need it, and there's no giant bomb in your car somewhere waiting to go off. Now the second reason I don't like them is, as you see in the chart, you can take green energy and put it into an electrolyzer and electrolyze the hydrogen and oxygen, but the problem is when you want to use that for a fuel cell, you can only store the hydrogen, so you have to give off the oxygen. Now this process is extremely inefficient, meaning the amount of electricity you got to put into making this hydrogen is not worth the amount of hydrogen you get when you have to separate these out like that, because it's not a high production situation when you're electrolyzing like that. Not to mention the hydrogen, even when you do separate it, the hydrogen's got to be put through a cleaning system to make sure it's just pure hydrogen and no other gases are in there. Fuel cells are very sensitive to other things getting into it other than hydrogen. So with that, hopefully I've clarified the difference between HHO fuel cells and a hydrogen fuel cell. One makes hydroxy gas, the other makes electricity from hydrogen atoms. And when you look at the diagrams and you see H2, that's because hydrogen likes to bond to things, and when they're floating around together, they like to bond to each other, so you usually get two hydrogen atoms as a hydrogen molecule, you could call it. Alright, so that pretty much covers the basics of the electrolyzation process and distinguishing everything I wanted to distinguish. Now the next video I put out will be moving on to the next pieces you see after the electrolyzer.